Retreat is such a good time for gaining insights. I feel like these BBCs are true confessions. So I had what felt like really impactful, almost an epiphany the other day about one thing that causes me so much low level anxiety and irritation throughout the day. And yet, usually I'm not able to pinpoint what exactly is causing it. It's usually, somebody else yeah, or my mind is being crazy. Um, but I was able to see that it's this need for control that is like underlying everything throughout the day. And it's quite subtle. And it has to do with controlling things both externally and internally. And I could see how much this desire for control blocks loving kindness and joy from arising and instead leads to a lot of anger and frustration. So, personally, I don't think I'm a very controlling person, but I have lived with very controlling people. Wink, wink. But I think all sentient beings, to some extent, want to control their environment. It's related to staying alive, and therefore it's kind of hard to see as something that's non virtuous. And I think Western culture in particular is obsessed with control. Um, Western, I mean European culture. I read a book in college by a French philosopher, and he made the argument that the institutions of the school, the hospital, and the prison were all designed in a similar way to maximize control of people's bodies and minds. And he didn't mention the monastery, but I think that's also. So at the monastery, we have good intentions, and actually the means are also good because it's informed by wisdom. The Buddha had a lot of wisdom, but in those other institutions, often there's kind of a lack of wisdom, and so the methods used to control people are not so skillful. And then there's a few books whose titles I really love, but I've never read them, and one of them is "My Name is Chellis, and I'm in Recovery from Western Civilization." I feel the same way in many ways. And I think the environmental crisis is due to this very short sighted wish to control nature in a way that maximizes pleasure only for human beings. Modern society doesn't see nature as a shared home, but rather as a resource to be exploited or an enemy to be conquered. And I remembered seeing us in a subway station in New York City. There was a mosaic on one of the walls in a station that had a picture of a wall that was cracked, and there were plants and grass growing through it. And it had a caption that said, "Nature must not win the game." And I think this attitude is really inherent in how we, construct our society. And the problem is that human beings are part of nature. So that if we're at war with nature, we're at war with ourselves. I think many people would say that they were happiest as a young child. And I think this happiness is due in large part to not feeling like we have to control everything. As a child, life is an adventure, it's a discovery, a game. We're okay that we don't know everything and actually are eager to learn from other people. And I found that when the wish to control enters my mind, all the joy and ease immediately gets sucked out. And this is particularly when I try to control what arises within my own mind and body. And again, I think society has encouraged us to relate to ourselves as production machines. And this attitude is both unskillful and very unkind. But aside from cultural conditioning, the Buddha taught that the root of our tendency to control is self grasping ignorance, which at the course level sees the self as the controller and the owner of the aggregates and seeks to maximize the pleasure that it gets from them and to minimize the pain. One way to loosen this need for control that I've identified is to reestablish a healthier relationship with my body. I'd say I've been pretty disconnected from my body for most of my life, thinking that intellectual pursuits are much more important and valuable. And I'm now reconnecting with my body through practices taught in the four establishments of mindfulness and learning to relate to my body in a kinder and gentler and more open way. I'm finally listening to the body and asking what it needs, how it's doing, rather than ordering it around or cursing at it for giving me pain or for not looking how I want it to look. I've discovered a lot of unkindness in how I relate to my body, not treating it as a living organism, but instead as a tool to be dominated for supposedly higher aims. So when I sit and watch the shifting sensations in my body, I realize that it's impermanent and totally not under my control. This is quite uncomfortable for the self-centered or the self-grasping ignorance to recognize. And I see my mind wanting to label the exercise as boring or, not going to lead to anything too important. But I know that learning how to relate to my body in a kinder and my mind in a kinder way is the key to learning how to relate to other people in a kind way. So letting go of the wish for control doesn't mean that we become passive blobs. Receptivity is not passivity, and tolerance is not weakness. And this is something, again, I think our society really doesn't have its head wrapped around. If we give up control, we can still recognize that we can influence things, but we do it with an understanding that we're connected with everything else, and we always exist in relationship to other beings, and we no longer see them as something to be manipulated for our own ends. There's this element of uncertainty that's involved with giving up control, and I think that can be very scary uh, for me, for many people. But I've found that the ease and contentment that comes with having a more accommodating attitude is definitely worth the surprises that come. And I would say I credit this shift in attitude with what allowed me to let go of my old lifestyle of having a job, a bank account, a career, that security, and going off into the unknown to pursue what seemed to lead to a more lasting happiness. I had to give up that sense of control. And in the process, I found that life became interesting again. Instead of drudgery to be endured or a battlefield to be navigated, I was finally able to work and serve others from a place of willingness and creativity instead of just trying to get something out of them or to avoid punishment. So, of course, all of this is very easy to say, but more difficult to put into practice. Other things that I found helpful are holding my agenda lightly and trying to remember that harmony and kindness are more important than efficiency and predictability. And I think I have been able to see one area of success when it comes to coordinating offering service. I remember when I first started in that role, I would have the list, what everyone was doing at every time, planned out for the whole day. And day after day, I got so frustrated because it would change. So now I have like ideas, but it's completely open because I know as I'm walking up to that offering service meeting, someone's going to approach me and say, "Hey, I need this." But actually, everything seems to come together quite magically. So it's really a testament to the power of a good motivation and the power of a flexible mind to, get things done in a way that really meets everybody's needs and is joyful. So I'd like to close with a quote from the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And I think this is a beautiful critique of the controlling, self centered attitude. So he says, "Do you want to improve the world? I don't think it can be done. The world is sacred, it can't be improved. If you tamper with it, you'll ruin it. If you treat it like an object, you'll lose it. The master sees things as they are without trying to control them. She lets them go their own way and resides at the center of the circle."